very tense political situation. But today we're going to look a little bit further, and we're going to focus in on having a technical discussion on what can be sustainable development pathways for Myanmar. We will look in particular on renewable energy development, how we can make inclusive infrastructure planning and development. And for that discussion, we have a really interesting panel, and I'm very happy to introduce the panel. Next, please. So we have Rurik Marsden, who's the development director from the British Embassy in Yangon. We have Mr. Win Mutel, who's the executive director of Advancing Life and Regenerating Motherland Alarm, Myanmar. He's with us here today. Also online we have Mr. Min Chan Win, who is the country coordinator for the Private Financing Advisory Network, Pfan, in Myanmar. And then also online we have my colleague Urawana Menon, who's the program manager for sustainable infrastructure in Myanmar. And I should say also about myself, I am working for WWF Denmark, where I'm currently the climate advisor. So without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker, who is online from Yangon, Mr. Rurik Marsden, please.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be able to join this discussion today. And I'd like to thank WWF for organising the event and the invitation. And I'd like to say I'm very, very happy to see U Wimia Du, who's a tireless and inspiring advocate for environment issues on the stage in Glasgow. And I was hoping I could use these opening remarks just to say something about that fundamental dilemma that I think we all face at the moment as a result of the current situation. And I think it's very clear that climate change is going to be a critical issue for Myanmar in the coming decades. And I think it's also very true that what happens to Myanmar's forest and Myanmar's natural resources is going to matter to the region and to the broader world. So Myanmar's already been severely affected by climate-related disasters, including the horrendous devastation caused by Cyclone Nargis. And it's highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, including floods, cyclones, tsunamis, and droughts. So this is an incredibly important issue for Myanmar and people in Myanmar. At the same time, it's blessed with significant forest coverage. It has the largest area of surviving forest in mainland Southeast Asia. But those forests are they're disappearing fast. It's got the third highest rate of deforestation and degradation globally. And furthermore, I think the development choices that Myanmar makes over the coming decades and the coming years are going to determine whether it takes a green and resilient path or a route that bakes in vulnerability and increases dependence on highly polluting energy sources. So recognizing the fundamental importance of all these issues, this time last year, the UK was really trying to put climate at the heart of everything we were doing in Myanmar. And one example is a work that we were doing with the Ministry of Finance to support a project bank, the creation of a project bank, which was a process for reviewing all infrastructure investments, including from an economic and environmental and a social perspective. But as you know now, Myanmar is in the middle of a terrible political, economic and social crisis. After the military took power on the 1st of February, a series of protests, peaceful protests were suppressed, and the country's seen a growing surge of conflict, disruption to services, and a major economic crisis. And the impact on people in Myanmar has been enormous: displacement, lost jobs, and hunger. And last year, the UN estimated that 1 million people in Myanmar were in need of humanitarian assistance. This year, it is 3 million, and it's likely to grow significantly again next year. In addition, the crisis has reduced the space for many important local partners to work on important issues like climate change. And in response to the crisis, many bilateral donors have stepped back from work with the authorities. So stopping work on a range of capacity building and policy development projects, such as the UK-supported project bank that I mentioned earlier. So the kind of challenge that I think we face is, how do we think about supporting climate change at the moment? What are the approaches that are realistic to deliver and that are achievable within this complicated political and conflict context? And you know, I think for the UK, our primary focus is on supporting efforts to help Myanmar resolve the political crisis and on standing by the people of Myanmar in a time of humanitarian need. But I would argue that given all that, we can't ignore the long-term importance of the climate crisis, which sits, you know, behind the crisis, the immediate crisis we see at the moment. So 3 possible ways of thinking about this that I'd like to suggest are, firstly, I think we should really prioritize how we build climate resilience into the heart of our humanitarian response to the current crisis. And development partners often talk about the nexus of peace, development, and humanitarian activities. But I think it's absolutely essential that at the moment, at this time, we add resilience to climate change into our core thinking. And, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars will need to be spent to respond to humanitarian needs in Myanmar in the coming year. And we should be innovative and thoughtful in thinking about how we maximize the positive collateral benefit we can get for climate resilience by designing those interventions in a way that thinks about climate. Secondly, and just as importantly, I think we should continue working to nurture and support local processes that already exist to protect forests and nature. And where we can, we should be finding ways to continue to support the efforts of local communities to manage and protect their natural resources. And by doing that, I think we can also help build their resilience, and we can help build the foundations for future democratic processes and future accountability. And a good example of this is the role that different land rights systems play in different parts of the country, and the role that they play in the preservation of some of Myanmar's most valuable forest areas. And other examples might include community managed forestry or mangrove rehabilitation efforts. So it's important to support local initiatives that help to manage natural resources. And thirdly, I think it's really important that we find the space to keep on investing in building capacity to analyze and respond to climate change in Myanmar. And at the moment, international partners are not able to build capacity within the sort of formal authorities. But that doesn't mean that we can't work with other partners and other actors in Myanmar to build capacity. For example, I think there are important opportunities to work with civil society, with organizations in the responsible private sector, and with other actors to develop innovative and appropriate responses to climate change. And investing now in understanding and in building that capacity and an analytic capability will help Myanmar to recover faster when there are more opportunities. So in conclusion, I think that the discussion today is going to generate a lot more and much better informed ideas than I've been able to suggest. But I do think that this conversation about how we find the space for work on climate resilience and work to make sure that Myanmar manages the climate crisis in ways that protect people is absolutely essential. It's a very difficult, in some ways, conversation, but I think it's a very, very important conversation. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to make a small contribution at the start of the discussion. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Rurik Marston, for those opening remarks, reminding us to both look at the short term but also keeping the long-term development in mind, reminding us that fighting climate change, addressing climate change needs to be done both now as well as in the long term. And it's great to hear that UK remains committed and standing by Myanmar. I think there are many people here and people listening in happy to hear that bilateral donors should keep their support and finding new ways to support Myanmar in the current situation. You speak to the importance of civil society partners, so bilateral partners working now with new partners, civil society, which brings me to the next speaker, and I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Win Myut. Thank you so much for coming all the way from Myanmar to participate here in Glasgow and raising the voice of the people. Would like to invite you to speak to the point on maybe elaborating a bit more from your perspective on the challenges facing currently the people and what perspectives you see as possible actions. So please, Mr. Win.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening. So first of all, I would like to express my thanks to the FCDO and then WWF for bringing me to be here. So I feel a little bit comfortable and inclusive. Otherwise, Myanmar is quite isolated and not to get along with the global climate action. Now I have a better feeling right now. So thanks for that one. So for those who are not want to know me, so I want to introduce a little bit myself. I have been working inside Myanmar at the civil society capacity. So what we have been doing is promoting the community-based natural resource plan, since 1997, 1998. Even at the time, we also have a similar, situation, very difficult circumstances, but we are able to find a space to be able to, build this civil society space and to do something community-based natural resource man. So with that, I would like to again here, tell our experience how we can continue that kind of thing, even we are facing the great challenges right now. Okay, so let me start with what I'm thinking on these climate actions, for the carbon neutrality in Myanmar. So if you look at to the national these NDC reports, but the views it was expressed there is totally different from what we civil society thought to be. So because if you look at to that NDC report, so the report clearly said that so Myanmar won't be necessarily taking a position to address these mitigation or whatever in the economic scale. That means, so they will do whatever feasible on the volunteer basis. It's not so serious. But for us, as a person working in the community level for over 3 decades, I really want more active, proactive role rather than, easygoing way of, getting along with this global action. So also, even though the emissions of greenhouse gas from Myanmar is not so high compared to other, but again, there's a certain point that need to be pay attention why we need that sort of, global action. So for example, if you look at the map here, I show you that, Myanmar is one of the highest deforested nation after, Indonesia and Brazil and Malaysia. So we, every year we lost nearly 1 million acres or 400,000 hectares annually. That's why very high, So that's why managing these forests are not only important for these, global climate action, but also important for the local livelihood and, environmental sustainability at the country. So that's why I really want the Myanmar to be more proactive role, addressing these forestry issue. And again, also when we further look at what Myanmar is going to do is they want, according to their plan, then by 2030, the deforestation, 50% of deforestation could be reduced. Well, now here in Glasgow, everybody is talking about zero deforestation, but the country like Myanmar is sharing 50. Well, that might be realistic in terms of limited capacity, financial resource, and institution. But again, from my point of view, if we desire, we can do the zero deforestation if there is a proper political support and proper people participation in the effort. But again, so what I want to also highlight it, even though our emission is not so significant, but again, Myanmar is home for the more than 230 globally endangered species, right? Again, also we are sharing we are in the middle of the bio corridor that link to the Yunnan or Eastern Himalaya, at the same time Indo-Malayan, so that's why the loss of forest means a lot to the global sustainability as well. Again, more warning is given by the Smithsonian Institute in the last year, because there is a new coronavirus species found in Myanmar. It's not similar to what we have with COVID-19, but again, as you know, as some of the research pointed out in the Wuhan case, those bats who are hosts of these coronavirus evolve, time to time when there is an environmental stress, in their habitat. Again, now Myanmar is the deforestation very high, environmental degradation very high. Anytime these new species can be evolved into the very dangerous, but this aspect has been not considered very well among the international community. So we also have to look at, even though we have a lot of important crisis right now, they also, what I'm telling you here is also that there's a great danger. There might be a threat, it may trigger later on if we don't pay enough attention to that one. That's why I really want that addressing forest issue properly. But again, the challenge is to do this forestry issue better. I think we also have to have a political resolution on the land tenure agreement and other political agreement on federal, because we are in the process of political negotiation, how the power can be shared. Without solving that one, it's also difficult to imagine that these forestry issue can be addressed very well. Okay, this is what I want to intervene on the mitigation part that is highlighted in our NDC report. But again, another thing is the adaptation side, resilient part. Again here, but what given attention in the NDC is they just focusing so much on the NAPA, National Action Plan or Adaptation at the national level, MAP-DRR, or how disaster reduction can be reduced. But what is the need at the local? Because all the disasters are taking place at the local level, right? So we need a more local. So we are pushing all the time to create the sort of local adaptation plan that look at the district level, trying to identify the most vulnerable area, trying to mobilize the fund from the central government as well as some look at that. In that way, they know better prepare, not a passive role to ask money from someone else when there is a disaster. No, they prepare before, very proactive. That kind of thing need to be done. Okay, that is what I see there. So what I'm trying to say right now, and given the political circumstances right now, what we can do is, I just want to share with what we are doing right now. So I'm giving you some idea, to continue the support to Myanmar. Because now, when COVID-19 was quite serious, I myself infected by the COVID in July. But how I can escape from that, this problem is because of the self-help capacity we have. Because we cannot go to public health care, so we community each other, help each other. So what I mean is we have to further strengthen this community-based, these emergency response and preparedness that one. So our group has already developed the mobile application that so local community can call directly and ask any medical advice for those the health problem they are facing. But top of that, what is needed is also medicines or other food or nutritional or sanitation, equipment, something like that. So for that, it's required sort of logistics support. So we have been working in Myanmar for quite a long time. Then we have a civil society network everywhere. So we can directly ask these civil society network at the local level whether they can further support to those community who are using these mobile apps. That's on the way we are developing. So if you like, we also have to address these, these COVID-19, problem, because the situation is quite terrible, even though it's not so serious right now in urban area, but still it's widespreading in the rural area right now. We have to address that. That also provides space for civil society to continue. Because of the current situation, it's difficult for civil society to mobilize to it. By doing this COVID-19, then we have a certain condition that we can continue support. So please think about that option. We have to further strengthen on that one. In that way, at least we can minimize the loss of human, because of the COVID. So once you build this community capacity, you can do other related, resilient work or other thing. There's one thing I want to suggest. Second thing, what we are doing is, this cash forward or food forward, environmental restoration, no nature-based solution, whatever. We can link together one humanitarian needs for those, food crisis we are facing right now. At the same time, we can have this nature-based solution for restoring mangrove or degraded dry land or watershed or water resources. Because in 1997, I did it together with UNDP when I was together. So that is one feasible approach. We can really strengthen on that one. By combining these two approach, food forward, or whatever, as World Food Program or other, they did a lot in China or Ethiopia. It's very successful after that year. Why you are providing emergency at the same time you restore the ecosystem. That is very much feasible. I strongly request everyone to pay attention on that one, to explore more what will be the feasibility. Of course there might be a logistic challenge, but we can overcome it, later on. But the last thing I want to also share is that innovative mechanism approach. Because of the certain unique situation, without that innovative mechanism, we cannot do that. For example, even we work with some research institute from Switzerland and Thailand to be able to detect that any round in the beds, when there is an irregularity there, we can observe and we can locally test. Then we can send the sample further to other to investigate whether there is a sorrow, COVID, related problem or something like that. But for that, it also requires international partner together in the mechanism. So with that, I would like to conclude that. So these are some experience. Myanmar should not be left out on any global action. We should be together, even though the challenges are very huge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Win, and for pointing us towards there are things that can be done, but adding to climate also the importance of healthy ecosystems, strong biodiversity for the people of Myanmar, but also for the whole region. And then the point of saying working on emergency or working on addressing COVID is actually a stepping board for also addressing longer term issues like ecosystems, climate change. So in the challenges, there's also an opportunity. So thank you very much, Mr. Min for sharing. Sorry, Mr. Win for sharing that. And for things to happen, we need finance, and I think that's the next speaker will address this point. That will be a speaker joining us online from Myanmar, Mr. Min Chan Win from Pfan. He's the country director. Please, Mr. Min, I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you. First of all, my name is Min Chan Win. I'm the country coordinator for Pfan, Private Financing Advisory Network. First of all, I would like to thank the WWF organization as well as the local team for inviting me and giving the opportunity to be in this virtual event. My presentation to all of you as a representative of Pfan is to give a brief overview of financing renewable energy development in Myanmar. First, let me briefly explain about my organization, about Pfan. So slides, please. Yes, okay. So we are a global network of more than 170 climate, clean energy, and financing experts with a principal mandate to support project developers in the climate mitigation and adaptation space. We advise low carbon, climate resilient businesses and matching appropriate financing. As you can see on the next slide, we actually serve as the missing gap between these project developers that are focusing on the adaptation, mitigation and adaptation space and bringing them together with potential investors. Next slide, please. So far, we have achieved $2 billion in total investment, leveraged over 180 projects globally. And this has been a meaningful achievement by all of us working in the organization. Next slide, please. We support a variety of sectors and technologies, as you can see all on this slide, starting from all the way from agricultural businesses, all the way to waste treatment. Next slide, please. In parallel, we promote gender mainstreaming, and we encourage both developers and investors to become more sensitive of the gender issues as well. Next slide, please. Some of the project development pipeline in Myanmar that we do includes a company called Techno Hill Engineering. I highlight this case because this is actually supporting the rural population in the mini grid program, and actually also being run by a leading woman entrepreneur as well. We at Pfan have supported to improve their business case and their investment pitch in trying to attract more than $2 million in investment. Next slide, please. Another is Eco Solutions. This is an interesting company because their focus is on solar water pumping solutions to rural communities, as well as agricultural farms as well. Next slide, please. Another project that we support is Comet Exercise Books. And this is a company that specializes in recycling waste paper and turning them back into exercise books for the children. Next slide, please. So I've been with the organization for 2 years now. Actually, I started Pfan organization in Myanmar. And together I have 3 network advisors, as well as 2 strategic partners, which WWF is actually one of them. So my presentation today, as I mentioned to you earlier, is to explain and give a brief overview of the financing renewable energy development in Myanmar. So we all know that financing is a crucial component in this case, any sector, but let's say even for the renewable energy sector, this is actually one of the most crucial components. Availability of agile and affordable financing, designed especially for renewables, will certainly serve as a catalyst for clean energy-enabled economic growth. So renewable energy systems can provide significant social impact, but will require financial support to be viable. If we look globally, for both on-grid and off-grid settings, also on captive power systems, integrating renewable energy systems with small, medium, and large-scale industries and agricultural processing are proven to be commercially viable, but the most important missing thing is finance to help overcome it with the high capital cost that naturally comes with the projects. So understanding that the importance of finance, let me give you a brief overview of the financial landscape and the key challenges that are connected with renewable energy projects in Myanmar. The financial sector in Myanmar is probably the least developed of all Southeast Asian nations and cannot adequately fulfill its role as a financial intermediary. This is a really sad part. So if you look at both the equity and the debt side, let's first look at the equity side. We still lack a well-developed capital market, and availability of venture capital is very limited. On the debt side, bank loans are only available for financing short to medium-term collateral-based financing. And this is a reflection of the traditional conservative approach of the banks. And also because of most of the customer deposits are also on a short and a medium-term basis as well. If you look at the renewable energy project side, there's a lot of unproven business models, limited success stories. So that's also hindering both sides, as I mentioned to you, both on the provider's buy side as well as the developer side as well. On top of that, there's a general lack of regulatory and legal frameworks, enforcement, and financial infrastructure that supports potential renewable energy projects. So if you listen to what I just said now, it sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, but luckily enough, a lot of folks in Myanmar are trying to do a lot of innovative approaches and success stories as well. So let me give you a brief highlight about that as well. Understanding the point that a lot of these developers understand that the key will be to support and develop locally appropriate renewable energy technology and financing mechanism. So we try to adjust what we have in the country. For example, one of my Pfan network partners, another partner together with the WWF, is Smart Power Myanmar. Smart Power Myanmar is working together with a lot of mini-grid developers to connect with them with several local banks to make creative mini-grid bridge financing facilities, even on a short-term scale, providing with affordable construction finance. And this is actually one creative way Smart Power is trying to help to connect the dots at this point. This could potentially also be expanded to solar projects in the future, in the CNI, especially on the CNI space. They recently also successfully created and initiated an energy impact fund to support the last mile electrification facility as well. So in summary of what I just mentioned to you just now, given the low level of development for both renewable energy space and the financing sector in general in my country, and considering the size, the potential market, renewable energy sector continues to look very promising in Myanmar. We at Pfan, as well as together with our partners in WWF, we will do our best to support the industry to grow and to help the country develop in a very much sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Win, for sharing those insights with us. I think we can add to the very long list of the challenges facing Myanmar currently is also the financing sector and ways to finance development was one of your points, but at the same time also giving us insights into how it's actually already possible to invest and mobilize financing for the renewable energy sector development, giving businesses and communities access to clean and reliable energy is really a key point for the development of Myanmar. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure there'll be questions also for you later. But before that, I would like to invite the last speaker we have today, also online from Myanmar, or I think actually from India, sorry about that. Mrs. Urawana Menon, who is the program manager for WWF in Myanmar, who will speak about actually how we can harness the natural capital to secure infrastructure investments in Myanmar. So bringing us back to the topic of also importance of ecosystems and how we think about that in the development. So please, Mrs. Urawana.
Thank you, Sri. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be speaking amidst such an august panel. We've already discussed about the fact that there lie a lot of opportunities in the many challenges that Myanmar is facing. I would like to start by speaking a little bit about the all-time high in infrastructure investments that the globe is witnessing again. So if we picture this, 75% of the infrastructure that we will see in the year 2050 does not exist today. Complex, large-scale infrastructure investments are being planned across Asia, and all of those are reshaping geographies and economies in some way. That is significantly true for Myanmar. The map you see here looks very cluttered already, but it only depicts one of the many infrastructure project portfolios that the government has. So this is probably only the transport infrastructure corridor map, and it already looks too congested. While undoubtedly infrastructure opens doors for development like no other intervention, we also know that it also threatens ecosystems, degrades natural capital, leads to biodiversity loss, almost always transforms local livelihoods. And what we are recently seeing is creates social conflict at national, local, or sometimes even transboundary scales. But it doesn't have to be like that. Why does infrastructure planning and delivery lead to the reduction in adaptive capacity of communities living around the project, or users actually sometimes using the infrastructure investment in itself? Is it because planners and engineers have conventionally trained themselves to look at the quickest and the least cost method of drawing up that route or siting that hydropower dam without thinking if it crosses through, destroys, or permanently, irreversibly damages those valuable ecosystems on which you, I, and most importantly, the people of Myanmar depend. Infrastructure planning actually could be the single most important opportunity to integrate global agreements on climate, on nature, to secure country commitments, achieve NDCs, and even bring millions out of poverty. Why do I say that? A rough estimate tells us that if we deliver our infrastructure investments in a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient manner, we would have achieved 60% of the SDG targets and goals by 2030. Next slide, please. Now, how do we get there? If it can be done, there has to be a way to get there. So how do we get to a stage that when infrastructure investments are being planned or envisioned, climate change forecasts are accounted for? How do we get to plan infrastructure in a manner where there are no road closures because of landslides, where the infrastructure investment in itself doesn't suffer from climate stresses, external shocks, or most importantly, the fact that financiers most worry about, which is about delays, which is about infrastructure investment getting converted into non-performing assets. Unfortunately, we think about all these things at the approval stage, the red zone, as I'd like to call it. And that's the stage where we've moved already too far into the process, where opportunity for innovation is very less, where anything we do now is going to improve ecosystem health or to cause minimum damage, is mostly going to be about mitigation, mostly going to be about reducing impacts, and is going to be very costly. Could you click on this slide, please, Sean? What we actually need is to integrate natural capital assessments, ecosystems, at the very pre-planning stage. What does that mean? That means that even before we've set our goals of $1 trillion of infrastructure investments and X kilometers of highway connectivity and X number of transport corridors and trade benefits, before that, we need to set our natural capital, ecosystem, and climate resilience goals. Because this is the stage where we can explicitly consider and factor in their benefits. If we want infrastructure to truly work for people, nature, and economies in the long term, and most importantly, contribute to societal resilience benefits, we need to start here. Retrofitting at the end and talking about green-gray approaches or saying that X million trees will be planted as compensatory afforestation, because those are the kind of conversations we have at the approval stage when we want to quickly get the environmental impact assessment done, is not really going to give us long-term climate resilience. If we want to truly embed nature-based solutions in our thinking, we need to start with nature, not think about it at the end. And that's when we'll be able to really integrate the forests for the critical role they play in all the various services. For example, reducing flood risk on highways, reducing sedimentation risk on the hydropower dams. That's when we'll be able to integrate these assets and factor in the various resilience services they give, not just for you and me, but for the infrastructure assets themselves. Next slide. This is my last slide. So I think all of that in theory seems fine and seems envisionable. But when it actually comes to doing these things, when it actually comes to embarking upon the path of climate-informed infrastructure and investments, what is it really going to take? First, we have to change the language we use when we're talking about infrastructure, probably. So we should, rather than only talking about goals of connecting as many people or goals of building X kilometers of transport networks and telecommunication networks and piped water lines and sewage networks, we have to pay more emphasis and almost club the words cumulative impacts, risk reduction, and long-term results in the narrative. And that is what is going to change the political narrative as well. When those become the factors that actually determine how effective infrastructure delivery is, that's how decision making is going to change. Secondly, and most importantly, actually, for a country like Myanmar that receives official development assistance, lot of foreign direct investments from countries like India, China, Singapore, and all other nations across, we probably can explore the possibility of transforming how that finance flows in. Can there be specific predetermined components of capital that are dedicated to nature-based solutions, that are dedicated to natural capital assessments, that are dedicated to assessing flows of resilience benefits? Thirdly, I think the non-state actors can play a key role. Indigenous people, local communities, civil society organizations, and citizens have to educate and empower themselves so that they can create the demand for the infrastructure that they want, for the infrastructure that will stay, that will serve them, and that will not reduce their capacity to fight climate change. And for that, citizen engagement in policy development and advocacy is going to be crucial. Lastly, all of this is only going to be possible if we have access to robust, solid, consolidated data, because only then can we ensure transparency and accountability. With all of this, we can envision a systemic shift in infrastructure. It's not going to be easy because it's going to be about shifting the long drawn, conventional go-to methods of least cost spatial analysis and the myopic approaches temporally to something that is fundamentally different, that fundamentally changes the way we perceive infrastructure and we perceive nature. But this is possible. And Myanmar actually has an incredible opportunity to get it right before it loses a lot. So at the end, probably I'll just say that a different future, a future with much more resilience is possible. It's only about when we decide to envision it. Thank you, Trine.
Thank you very much, Orawana, for giving us that thought and that way of thinking that actually infrastructure development is an opportunity for creating resilience in Myanmar in general, if we start with thinking about nature and natural capital. So thank you very much to all the speakers, and now I'd like to invite questions from the room, or any questions from the room? We'll go with them first. Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much for the very comprehensive PowerPoint from all speakers. So I think I have two questions to Mr. Ming, who's sitting here. Yeah. So actually, I'm a bit surprised because of the one of the fourth deforestation in Myanmar. Yeah. So do you know Myanmar we cut down the forest to export to another country or not? What is the main use of the deforestation? Yeah, the main reasons in Myanmar. And the second question, you mentioned a lot about the community's activities for forest protections. Did you have any, or the government of Myanmar have any kind of program or policy for the forest protections, and how CSO in Myanmar can engage in this policy or advocacy? Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll just like to ask before we move for you to answer those questions around forestry, Mr. Min, are there any questions for the online support? Are there any questions in the online chat? We will take them as well. There are no questions currently. Okay, thank you. So please, Mr. Win.
Well, the major cause of the deforestation, I think this is the first question you asked. Well, there's many causes, contributing to the deforestation. But the study done by ADB, this study the most I like, they found the statistically significant, correlated ones are two causes. One is a commercial agriculture, and another is forest over exploitation of the forest products. And that might also include both legal and illegal logging and extractions, and also charcoal or firewood, extraction. These are the two major strongholds. That's why when we're trying to address reforestation, for the zero deforestation, if we have a better sustainable agriculture and land use policy, it's almost we address the two-thirds of deforestation, So that's why it's a very important, okay? That's why we really have to tackle that one. Then second question is what kind of program we have. But so far we have a community forestry program that enable local community to be able to manage the forest they traditionally manage. But this is not sufficient. We all the time as a civil society challenging. Well, it's a good initiative. I myself, promote that community forestry for almost 20 years. I'm a more than 100,000 acre. Well established, more than 100 community. It's already for the carbon market to be linked, but we face a lot of problem. But now government doesn't have, when that community forestry was promoted, that's not clear in the law that, whether you have a carbon right. Yeah, you have access to the land use right, you have access to the forest protection right, but not clearly mentioning whether you can sell your carbon to, global market. So that's also a very vague situation. Also, another issue is this community forestry only suitable for certain geographic condition. When you have a traditional people managing huge, their customary land tenure, it's not appropriate. So we need another kind of, CCA, the community conservation area management system, and it need to be backed up by law. Otherwise, because that, NDC itself can mislead like a green grabbing. For the sake of saving these forests, I make it reservations or protected area. Then those communities who are living in that area might be loser, So these are some of the situations, and to make it short.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Wynn, also emphasizing the importance of land tenure as we move into to address deforestation as part of the climate challenge. I think I've been informed there's one question online, so if I can ask our online support to read that question, please.
To support civil society-led climate actions in Myanmar sooner rather than later.
Heron, could... Sorry, Heron. Sorry for technicalities. Heron, can you just repeat the question, but just hang on a second until we shift from audio in this room until online audio. So just wait a second. Thank you.
Okay, now. So a question to any of the panelists. What would your message be to international investors and donors on the priorities and mechanisms required to support civil society-led climate actions in Myanmar sooner rather than later?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. And I think we will just have one last round because we're also coming close to the hour. So if I could ask all four panelists to just give a quick reflection on that and any last remarks that you have. And I think we will start with online participants. We'll start with you, Rurik. It's been a long time since we heard from you. So please, could you give a reflection for that?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, it's going back to some of the things that Uwimia said. So I think that particularly looking at where there are existing mechanisms and processes and community kind of organized processes and supporting those, that seems to me to be very important. From the donor perspective, I don't think we should be trying to create new things, and I think that. It's really important from the kind of private sector perspective that if people are thinking about engaging in investment, they're really looking at the range of stakeholders who have opinions in Myanmar, and they're making sure that they're understanding the kind of range of challenges and the range of questions that they need to look at. So, probably it's not. I would think that it's a time to kind of understand issues maybe rather than rushing into them. That would be my reflection on that. Thanks. Over.
Yes, thank you, Rurik. And I would like to ask also Mr. Win if you can have a comment.
Well, this is what I'm. Hello. This is what I'm advocating. So not through civil society, but there's a community to community self-help mechanism already. We civil society are just facilitating the process to be happen. So it's together we have to do. But as I reminded, we need because of the unique situation right now, we need an innovative mechanism. So sort partnership at the same time, logistic, other issues need to be addressed. Otherwise, still there is questionable to do.
Yes, thank you. And then I would like to ask Urawana and then Mr. Min to finish off just with quick remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Trine. I'll be very quick because excellent points have already been made. Just to say that Myanmar already has an excellent history of non-state actors, civil society standing strong and tall for several issues. And if we can just equip them, support them, ensure a lot of transparency, accountability, and equip them with data, with innovation, with tools and technologies, I think they can be a very strong force. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Win?
Yes, I would also like to support all the earlier panelists have just mentioned in terms of the support and what the international investors and donors could do, especially in this where we are in terms of the situation. I think it's actually the most important time to support, because what the people need to support, and with all the things that you're supporting earlier, the value that's been created or the impact that's been created now is more important than ever. So I would like to say that we value that support, and I think, and I also like to highlight that the support is more important than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Min, for just emphasizing that the support is still needed and more than ever for the people of Myanmar and for Myanmar. I think, Mr. Rurik, in the beginning you said, let's put climate at the heart for the short-term and also the long-term support for Myanmar. There are partners to work with. There are civil society and non-state partners and communities to work with. So let's put climate and people and Myanmar at the heart. Thank you very much for today.